Hello again guys, and welcome back to another Big Al Devon video, and this is a continuation of Big Al's Big Weapons series. Right guys, so a word of warning for those who are not used to me on this channel. When I do my talk videos like this, I sometimes continue my talks and go off in random tangents, and then I start expanding about different topics, and I sometimes don't always focus on the title of the video, but I feel it's much more organic just sometimes just to get in front of the camera and talk and say what's on my mind, and if there's something relevant to say that is that is linked to something else that I was saying, then I will put it in. So just bear with me guys, I will address what the title of this video is about, which I haven't made up yet, so I suppose that's one reason why I sometimes go off on a tangent, but it's essentially why I do what I do, why I collect historical weapons, and the reasons why. But no doubt I will put in a little bit of random knowledge and random experiences in here as well. So for me, really, there are three aspects to my hobby. Why I first got into collecting historical weapons was not that long ago. I'm by no means an expert in regards to collection of historical weapons. I've only been doing it for about 12 to 18 months roughly. Closer to 18 months now I think it is. But, you know, seriously, about a year to one and a half years, somewhere around that point. Okay, so it's not been that I've been doing it that long. However, it's been long enough to see my knowledge and interest in the hobby change and evolve, at least to some degree. And so the reasons why I continue to do the hobby at present time are actually different to the reasons, or no, not different, but there are expanded reasons as to why I continue the hobby now as there were at the beginning. At the beginning there was just the cool factor essentially, and I'll get into the reasons why I got into historical weapons in a minute, but it was predominantly, well, they're cool looking, and I would love to just have them and display them and have them as a talking point when friends come around, and I'd love to have a little play around with them from time to time, right? But then nowadays, as I say, I have additional reasons on top of that, more mature reasons as to why I like to collect my historical weapons. And of course, as I've started to change and evolve in my reasons as to why I do this hobby, I've started to develop a sort of mindset as to what I want to do with the future within this hobby. It's a hobby for certain that I really can see myself doing for many years, you know, perhaps to the end of my days, you know, and it's something that I really do enjoy doing as part of my sort of spare time, you know. Those guys who watch this channel know predominantly amount of my spare time is spent training down the gym and my martial arts, and that's not going to change, so I have to find a little bit of extra spare time to fit all this in as well. So it's a little bit hard to do, but I'm making the time for it because I'm really enjoying it. Okay, so really I suppose the reason why I first got into collecting historical pieces of historical weapons was, as I say, the cool factor. But what do I mean by the cool factor, so to speak? Well, when we're all young, and when I say young, I mean like kids down here sort of thing. When we're all kids, we all have a particular interest, whether it's dinosaurs, racing cars, you know, action men, you know, whatever it is. We all have interests, but we all have a sort of interest that we continue into our adult years. And for me, one of my biggest interests was ancient warfare. I loved and just the ancient civilizations overall. So we're talking right back to sort of the Celts and the Greco-Roman period, right through into sort of medieval period. And my interest didn't really expand into sort of the Georgian sort of period, as it would be called over here in England. You know, the period of the Napoleonic era. I didn't really have, and still don't really have, a massive interest in that point in history. But my focus was always predominantly medieval knights. As a kid, I loved the idea of being a man in full plate armour, with a sword, swinging it around, and winning battles, and rescuing fair maidens and killing dragons and all that sort of stuff. For me, that was always something I found interesting. I found the armour and the swords they used beautiful. I always still now do think the aesthetic is just, there's something about it. It's just like, for people who appreciate, for example, a painting, who collect artwork by famous painters and that, and a lot of people will look at that and they go, that's a lot of money to spend on, you know, a bit of paint ink or whatever. Well, you know, it's the same with historical weapons. I know a lot of people will look at it and just say, well, why do you collect this sort of stuff? But for me, it's because predominantly I find it beautiful. I find it beautiful to look at and mesmerising in its own way. I can see the stories behind the weapons and the forging processes and things like that. And I've always been able to do it, even before I had a working knowledge of how they were made, how they were used, so on and so forth. So my childhood interest in that sort of these kind of things obviously progressed into adulthood, and as you become an adult, obviously you start working. You start to, after time, not initially, but after the time of working, you settle down a little bit and you start saving up a bit of money, have a bit of spare cash, and you think, you know what, I'm going to treat myself. I've worked hard, I'm going to have a bit of fun. Okay, and so I started buying a few historical weapons and pieces. Now, every now and then, you splurge out on something that breaks the mould, but something that you've got to have. For me, it's my Conan Atlantean sword. I love my Conan the Barbarian sword. I love it. It is, I will say, completely useless in the sense that it is not a working weapon, really. I know it would never stand a chance against a proper medieval longsword or arming sword. But it's a one meaty piece of steel, and I love it. And I'm determined to create or adapt a fighting style that would work with it to at least a functional level. And I think because of my size and my strength, I do kind of. I can do it. At least I'm in a position where I feel that I can make that kind of sword work. Because for me, now that I'm in the hobby, and this was as I first started the hobby, it wasn't just that I liked the look of the weaponry. I liked the idea of, because of my martial arts background, I liked the idea of trying to work out how to use the weaponry. I'm not getting official HEMA training as such. Obviously, I've read some of the manuals, or at least glanced at it, and I've used YouTube. YouTube's a great place to find, or at least watch people use, HEMA techniques, as they're called, which is a sort of ancient warfare techniques. People like Scalagrim and Shadiversity, the Metatron. These people, they can talk, or they can guide you into where to go, and even show you where to go to sort of learn these techniques. But for me, there is something to be said for that, and it's something that I will be getting more into. But it's a bit of a nerd factor there with it. I mean, I'm a big nerd, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to get nerdy with this hobby. I'm nerdy with a few of my other hobbies. I collect miniatures, for example, miniature wargaming. I am a nerd, okay, but I don't want to get nerdy with it, super nerdy with this. Not to that same degree anyway. When I just pick up the weapon, I want to think myself, without being taught, how would I use this weapon with my martial arts background, with my fighting experience. I've had far too many fights in my life, unfortunately, that I would like to admit. So from my experience of having to defend myself, having been in dangerous situations, how would I use these weapons if I was on a medieval battlefield and my life depended on using these weapons correctly? And so when I do my how to fight with videos with the particular weapons in question, they always will be focused on how do I use these weapons, not how were they used, but how will I use these weapons if I ever had to. If they ever designed a time machine and sent me back into the past and I had to defend myself against a medieval knight or a Viking or whatever, an Anglo-Saxon, how would I use these weapons to defend myself and defeat my opponent? That's how I always like to do it in my fighting style videos, and I think it gives a unique perspective to you guys. You see someone who's perhaps a little, I am a lot bigger and stronger than the average person, and I do have a fighting experience, and so I've got that little bit of brutality, so to speak, to my fighting style that perhaps might not be in a book, for example, because it's just, you can't always translate those kind of things into words, and I can say that for certain because I've read martial arts books, and I'm not self-taught in martial arts. I've had instructors. I've fought in the ring. I want to, within a year's time, go back into fighting in the ring, doing MMA fighting proper, as high level as I can do. If it's only amateur level, cool. But if I get higher, brilliant. But what I'm trying to say is I'm good at what I do in the martial arts, and that is partly because I've not learnt it from a book. You know, I've learnt it in the ring, in the heat of combat, the equivalent of heat of combat in the ring. I've learnt a lot of it, and also, you know, in the street. As I say, when I've done my security work, I mean, I've had to just defend myself against people who want to try and take advantage of myself, you know, or people I love. It's that sort of brutality, as I say, that I want to bring into the fighting styles. And as I say, the HEMA fighting techniques that are based purely on the manuals, don't get me wrong, I'm not downgrading them. They are fantastic, and they are an essential part of learning how to fight effectively and efficiently with a weapon, with a degree of elegance. But I just don't think they will ever show or give you that brutal side of things. Because, as I say, I can draw the parallels of trying to learn a martial art from a book. Yes, you can learn the moves, but there's a difference between knowing the theory and actually putting it into practice at times. And there are other things that you just wouldn't put into words that you can do with a weapon that, you know, just requires no mercy principle, essentially. Anyway, like I said earlier in the video, warning, I will digress. So as I was saying, one of the reasons why I got into the hobby was not only just because I like the weapons, the way they look, but I like trying to work out how I would use them to protect myself on a medieval battlefield. And that has obviously continued, but my passion for the hobby is actually matured. I think I would say the word would be, from that childhood passion, which is still very much there, but it's matured from that childhood passion to actually enjoying the maintenance side of it. One of my most favourite things about having my weapons now is that I have to spend quite a bit of time, because I've got a reasonable collection now. I have to spend a reasonable amount of time sharpening and maintaining my weapons, and actually a lot of my time is spent researching better ways on how to sharpen, clean, anti-rust sort of treatments, all the rest of it, and protect my weaponry. How do I keep them in the perfect condition? And not only to keep them there, but get them in better condition, because they're not in perfect condition at the moment. You know, if you watch a few of my videos on sharpening, I'm constantly trying to think, how do I get these weapons sharper, but with traditional techniques, with hand techniques. I don't want to use power tools. I want to do it the way that the old guys used to do it, you know, and develop the techniques through research. That's what I do. I go online, I read, and of course then when I put it into practice, I think, oh, actually, you know what, maybe I could do it this way, and then you sort of evolve it to your own personal style over time. And that, I find it very meditative, looking after my weaponry. I find it really relaxing. I enjoy it. I really do enjoy it. And the whole process of maintaining it and improving my weaponry is something that now is the most enjoyable aspect to it, to the point where I don't actually really play around with the weapons too much. I don't practice the fighting techniques as much as I used to, because, well, this is what I find enjoyable now. Don't get me wrong, I do, but it's not something that is, you know, the only thing that I do like it used to be. It used to be 100% of my time is swinging the axe around, trying not to damage the lights fittings, or if I was inside or if I'm outside, trying not to hit the neighbour's fence or the trees, and trying not to hit myself, you know, all that fun side of things. It's all gone a little bit now. I don't spend 100% of my time on that, because of course there's more things to do, so I can't spend 100% of my time doing it, because of course my time is divided. And as obviously I've developed these skills and these knowledge of how to sharpen weapons and things I had no clue about before, I've learned that there are other things that I can still learn or try to do. And the first of which is to build, and this is something I want to do both very much in the near future, and then continue to develop within the very far future, but that's to build my own historical replicas, my own historical weaponry. And the simplest way to do that is just to assemble, first of all, your weapons, but eventually to actually go on courses. I've noticed online that you can go on courses for blacksmithing. I would love to go on a blacksmithing course and learn how to do pattern welding, how to forge steel, and how to put that then into practice, into maybe not creating a sword, because swords are a lot more complicated than other things, but eventually swords, but how to create axe heads. And then obviously then I would have to learn carpentry to make or basic carpentry at least, to make the hafts where the axe head would go on, you know. So these are things that I want to learn. I want to learn how to build things. I want to learn how to build what I love. Not only just to maintain it, but to create completely new pieces, custom pieces that are, you know, fit in the specifications that I require from those weapons. Because of course, one thing I will say is when and as a result, I'll probably will find that I will be playing around with the weapons a lot more, different fighting techniques. Because when I'm playing around with my weapons, especially my Damascus, which is a particularly large weapon, it's about 5.5 foot long, I've noticed it's just a little bit too big, really, for me. Even though I'm tall, I prefer a little bit more sort of nimbleness in the weapon. Maybe it's just because it's a bit heavy at one end, you know, where the axe head is. I'm not sure, but the balance isn't quite right for me. And so, if, for example, over time I try different pieces, because my collection will get bigger and it will get better, and I will try different, you know, the same type. So let's say I have in the future 3 or 4 different Damascuses from different manufacturers. But like, well, I like the length of that. I like the weight of this. I like the handle on that because it's got a bit of a curve rather than it being completely straight. You know, I'll find features of the weapon, of the same type of weapon that I like, and if I can build something by having a more extensive knowledge on my current collection, I'll then be able to build something to my own it's a tongue twister, specifications. I'll be able to build them to how I want it. So let's say instead of a 50-inch shaft, I'd prefer a 40-inch shaft. I'll put a 40-inch shaft on there, but I like to keep my 10-inch blade on there. I'll put a 10-inch blade on there. I like the weight down there, so I'll make it a bit heavier, and I like this type of grip, so on and so forth. And eventually then I'll create the axe that works for me, you know, as best as possible. And then as a result, your fighting techniques, you're not changing it to make the weapon work, you're making the weapon work for you and the fighting techniques that you have. Okay, so and that's something which I just love the synergy between how they work with one another. How, as I develop my fighting techniques, I will have to change certain creation aspects of when I'm creating weapons and stuff, and when I'm forging the weapons or building the weapons or assembling the weapons. I've got to consider the fighting styles that I want to replicate. Do I want to go all out Viking, all out aggression? In this case, a longer haft, heavier blade. Yeah, absolutely, that would do much better. Or do I want to be a little bit more subtle and use some of the techniques that I think, you know what, it'd be actually better to have a slightly lighter blade there for a bit of extra speed. These are the things that you got to balance out. And so, as you can see, my plan of where I've come from to where I am, or where I'm going to, is progressed much more towards actually creation as well as maintenance. And the next thing that I'll be doing is, very soon, I've just ordered the materials to do so. I mean, I'm no blacksmith, so I can't forge steel, and I can't even touch trying to create pattern welded steel, because that's my passion at the moment. I want every single weapon that I get from now on to be pattern welded, like Damascus steel. I want pattern welded steel. That's it. I don't want to touch high carbon, normal carbon steel anymore. I want Damascus steel because I think it's so pretty. I love pattern welding. I think it's so pretty, and because my particular interest is in more the Viking period than anything else, obviously the highest quality weapons within that period of history were pattern welded. It was before, you know, more advanced forging techniques came, or, you know, higher purity sort of steel sources came, where you didn't need to pattern weld because obviously the temperature in the forge was so high. You didn't need to get rid of the impurities through this very sort of elegant system. But for me, I want to be able to pattern weld, and I want to be able to at least have a full collection of pattern welded weapons. I just think they're gorgeous. I admire the craftsmanship behind it and the ingenuity to create the original pieces, you know, just to come up with this idea of, well, we've got shit quality steel here, good quality steel here, but we don't know in what proportions, so we'll mix it together like this. Oh, it just amazes me how clever that the ancient people were, and I think pattern welded steel is one of the prime examples of how clever people were back then. and as a result, then the pieces that I have in my collection, as that expands, will just become even more artistic, but also more involving for myself. When I see it, I'll be like, yeah, I can see the craftsmanship, I can see the story, and I can imagine things as they used to be. I just find it very, very interesting, and it will just further deepen my enthusiasm for the hobby. Armor, yeah, eventually I will try and perhaps get some armor pieces. Basic pieces. Armor doesn't interest me as much as the weapons. I have no real desires to get anything. The only desire I have, and it's only a tiny little desire, is to get a Viking shield. That's because I want to try and get a one-handed axe, as well as a big Dane axe. I want to get a one-handed axe that would, work very well with obviously a shield. That's how they will be used. But it's not top of the list. I'll be honest with you, at the moment it's not top of the list. For me, the armour that I really like is very much the Viking Anglo-Saxon helmets and stuff. I think they look absolutely beautiful. But my real interest in armour is medieval full plate. And that's expensive, and two, I'd have to have a lot of storage space. The place where I live at the moment is just nowhere near enough space to be able to store a full suit of armour. So in the meantime, I could look at trying to get some chainmail, but I know there's different types of chainmail out there, butted and riveted, and I think riveted is the best type, but I would want a good piece of chainmail, and I would want it custom made, or at least made for my measurements, or at least fit my measurements, because obviously I'm a lot bigger than the average guy. I don't want a piece of chainmail that's designed to fit an average person, because it ain't going to go on me, so I'd have to look at trying to get some custom chainmail. If those are people are interested in creating their own chainmail, which again might be something in the future that I could consider, although I think it looks a little bit too complicated for me, is Lindy Beige. He actually did a video on how to create your own chainmail. Very interesting, and as I say, perhaps a little bit too complicated for me, but he was creating his own chainmail, and it was obviously taking him ages. He hadn't finished it at the time when I saw that video. I think he'd done part of a sleeve or something, but I'll have to go check that out, actually, one of his videos, to see if he's actually created the full piece yet. Type in Lindy Beige, guys. Lindy and the colour beige, all one word, and Lindy spelled Lindy. If you put that in, and go through his videos, you'll see something about how to create chainmail, and it's particularly interesting because chainmail you got to get right. Chainmail can be very wrong. Chainmail can be so bad that it doesn't offer any protection whatsoever. But if you get good chainmail, like the armor that used to be worn in old times, it will literally save. You can see why people wore it. It was tough as anything, it's only really a little bit less tough than full plate. The only reason it isn't as protective as full plate is because there are holes in it. In theory, the rings, there are gaps for sharp little points to go in. Whereas full plate, no, there are no gaps. Okay, so I find I wouldn't mind having some chainmail on my own. I'd like to get a helmet first and a shield perhaps, and then, as I say, I'll get some chainmail. But I don't think I'll ever be rich enough for full plate. But maybe one day you can imagine getting full plate, but that would be brilliant. But I'd have to get it custom made, because for me, armor is like it is even more so than the weapons. They're not display pieces; they're there to be worn. They're there to be cool. I want to feel like I can wear them. Anyway, guys, that's my sort of video on my enthusiasm for this hobby, where it was, and where it is now, and where it's going, and a few added little extra bits. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you soon. You got any ideas? You got anything you want to see? Put it in the comment section. I'll do my best to accommodate. Thank you. Bye bye.